Thanks for tuning in to the EthnoCO podcast, where our motto is helping people, help plants, help people. Please check out the links below and donate to our GoFundMe and Patreon to support the show.
We want to bring you a podcast that is inspiring, exciting, and scholarly, and share a bit of our curiosity about plants, people, anthropology, botany, shamanism, native cultures, environmentalism, and adventures in ethnobotany. Enjoy the show. You are a hunter in the Amazon, sometime deep in prehistory, maybe 5,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago, maybe 25,000 years ago. Depends on which scientist you ask about Amazonian history. But you are a hunter in the Amazon from one of the native groups in the region, and you're creeping along a riverbank looking for some game to bring back to the family, to the group, to the tribe for the night. And you see something through the brush, don't know exactly what it is. You draw your bow back, but then something stops you. You think, this is not like something I've seen previously. What is going on up there? And you notice that there is a jaguar, one of the most revered animals in your tribe, in your group. There's a jaguar, and he's rolling around on the ground, and it appears to be chewing on leaves and chewing on a vine. You think to yourself, what is he doing? The jaguar seems to not be in a normal state of mind. He seems to be kind of staring off into the distance and exhibiting kittenish, playful behavior. And you think to yourself, there's something going on here. There's something different. So you watch the jaguar for a while. Eventually he hops up and he sort of just wanders off in the jungle and he leaves. You go investigate what he was doing. And you find that he had pulled a liana, a climbing vine. He had basically pulled it down from the canopy, found the roots that were at the base of a tree, pulled it down from the canopy, and began chewing on the vine and the leaves. And later, you and your group, your native group in the Amazon, will discover that this is the ayahuasca vine, which is the name in Quechua. Your group doesn't call it that, but that's for a couple thousand years later, when the Incas get a hold of it, they would call it ayahuasca. And you decide that if the jaguar, this most revered of animals, uses this plant, then it must be something special. It must be something important. So you decide to take it back and throw it in a ceramic pot of boiling water and cook it up and see what it has to show you. And those are some of the origin stories of how native people in the Amazon discovered ayahuasca. They say the jaguar told us, or the jaguar showed us. And that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about animals that use drugs or animals that use psychoactives, medicinals, purgatives. It's thought the jaguar perhaps is using the ayahuasca vine as a purgative, but also gets some psychoactive effect from it as well. But anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today on EthnoCO podcast episode. Is this 004?
4. Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Number 4. So as always, my co-host Callum is here, and he's going to say a little introduction, and he's going to talk a bit about gorillas in Gabon.
Yeah, so this is episode 004, Animals That Use Drugs, or Zoopharmacognosy, which is a fascinating, epic word. And it's basically the study of animals in the wild, and probably domesticated animals too, that used narcotics, psychoactives, medicinal plants, and natural products in some way for some benefit. So I think a really interesting start is the gorillas in Gabon, which are the lowland and mountain gorillas, some of our closest relatives, huge animals, live up in the lush forests on volcanoes and things as well. And they have been studied. There's been some pretty comprehensive studies that found, analyzing their diets, and they found they, in general, consume 119 plants that are considered medicinal plants. They consume many more than that. But 119 medicinal plants have been verified by a lot of the people in the area too, a lot of the native people in the area, including the pygmies, that actually use the same plants for their own well-being. And one of the I thought it's pretty fascinating, because those 118 plants from 59 different plant floral families include all kinds of I guess, medicinal effects from stimulants, hallucinogens, cardio. I guess they're cardiac assisting medicinals. So they, I guess, promote healthy cardiovascular systems, respiratory illnesses, all kinds of things, as well as some of the purgative kind of chemicals and medicinals that actually help them flush out some of the parasites. But in particular, it's very interesting the accounts of them, the gorillas themselves digging up the Tabernanthe iboga plant and chewing on the root bark, which is exactly what pygmy tribes or people from the Congo Basin have done and have taught other native people how to do, which is fascinating. Scott, I'll let you talk about Tabernanthe iboga a little bit, but
Sure.
also accounts kind of extend to porcupines and wild boar in the area still doing the same thing, digging up those roots and somehow using it. And the native people think that they act erratically after chewing on some of this bark for a while. So once again, maybe learning and taking curiosity towards some of these plants. You want to talk about iboga?
Yeah. Before I talk about iboga, though, I'll say just to reiterate a bit of what you said. So the gorillas apparently use a species of, and I hope I say this correctly, Alchornea, which is Alchornea floribunda and Alchornea cordiifolia, which are two plants. I just find it so amazing that out of the hundreds of species, or maybe thousands of species in the jungle where these gorillas live, they're able to identify. And I wonder if they're taught by their parents, or if they somehow intrinsically know this through evolution. We're going to talk about the evolutionary advantages of using psychoactives in a bit, but how do they know how to differentiate which plant is the one to use for this specific purpose? But these Alchornea species that I mentioned, they're used by people in West Africa as an aphrodisiac in low amounts, in low doses, and as a visionary inebriant, a psychedelic basically in higher amounts, which is very similar to iboga. I'm pretty sure they're in the dogbane family. That is the common name for the family. And iboga, I think, is in the same family. Don't quote me on that. But the Bwiti, as well as the pygmies, use iboga. And it's sort of like ayahuasca in South America has become a sort of religion in and of itself, a spiritual practice. And yeah, iboga is an extremely powerful, Tabernanthe iboga, extremely powerful entheogen or psychedelic that contains a fairly novel and unique chemical compound, which is ibogaine. And ibogaine, that's a whole nother, we could do a whole podcast on iboga and ibogaine, but point being, it's a very, very powerful psychedelic, but I think it's a stimulant at lower doses, or an antidepressant, or it has a bunch of beneficial effects in lower doses. So it's just amazing that the gorillas know how to seek it out. And the people, just like people in the Amazon, the people in West Africa say, well, the gorillas showed us. We observed the gorillas and we decided to try to do the same thing. So that sort of just shows us that, you know, some people would ask, well, what sort of animals do drugs or psychoactives? And it's not, I don't know of any accounts of reptiles or fish using psychoactives. It's basically only mammals. So more highly intelligent, highly evolved, so to speak, animals that use drugs. And the jaguar and the gorilla are two really interesting examples. But let's see. Yeah, and maybe there's some people that say perhaps it's a fourth drive beyond thirst and hunger and wanting to procreate, wanting to have sex, is the drive for higher intelligent animals to want to inebriate themselves, to alter the consciousness, entertain themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know if you want to add something to that, Callum.
Yeah, I think it seems people would ask, like, why would animals in nature or domestic animals choose to do these things? And I think some of the science is documenting that now, that a lot of them have many co-benefits. A lot of these plants that they consume have co-benefits, quite often being purgative in nature, so causing expulsion of fluids from the body. So that could be an antiparasitic, antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, all of these things that are enhancing the survivability of the individuals that chose to partake in that behavior. And there may have been flow-on effects of maybe there are hallucinatory effects as well, or psychoactive effects, as we'll discuss a bit later.
Yeah, so as we mentioned previously, there may also be this this drive to want to entertain oneself, to inebriate oneself. It may be linked with an evolutionary benefit that many of these plants or substances convey. They're not always plants. Sometimes animals like the capuchin monkey and the lemurs of Madagascar will use millipedes. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but they probably give some sort of evolutionary advantage, and that's why it's become ingrained in the animals to want to do this. And some animals want to do it more than others. We'll talk about anting, which some birds do occasionally, and there's a very small percentage of them that do it like all the time, even to the detriment of their own health, like looking for food. They would just prefer to go anting, which is a funny term. But we think that there may be cognitive benefits, there may be benefits for the heart, the cardiovascular system, or there may be insecticide benefits, which is probably what the lemurs and capuchin monkeys are using these millipedes for. And I don't know if Callum, if you want to talk a bit about that.
So in terms of the the lemurs and the millipedes on Madagascar, it seems to be that it's most likely a learned behavior. I imagine there were some curious lemurs that decided to harass some of these millipedes, became curious about the scent or the toxins that were secreted, and then noticed an effect from that. Who knows how it actually went about? They are very social animals, so they would have taught their discovered behavior or their findings from this. But it seems to be a toxin from the millipedes that they secrete across their skin or their scales. I'm not really sure. It comes out of their mouth parts or anything. But the lemurs will start to rub it across their fur. They might be breathing in some of this vapor as well. They may have been ingesting small parts of it and seem to have a psychoactive effect very quickly after that. That they start becoming what appears to be inebriation.
Yeah, I would assume that originally it was. So it's very strange that it happens among capuchin monkeys in the Amazon, and it happens among black lemurs in Madagascar, which is like two widely different places. And it's amazing that they both came up with the same thing, which to me would hint at it being, is it convergent evolution when two separate groups evolve in the same way?
That's right.
Convergent evolution where these two widely different groups came up with the same answer to a problem. And so the capuchins or the black lemurs that experimented with this millipede, they had an evolutionary advantage, and they passed on those genes for, one, being curious, and two, the enjoyment of this inebriation that it brought about. So they'll take it and they'll find one and they'll grab it and they'll like bite it or like whack it against a tree, and then it excretes like this fluid, I think. I'm not sure out of where exactly. And they'll kind of rub it in their mouth, and then they start sort of foaming at the mouth and looking off into space. And this is mostly the black lemurs I'm referring to. There's actually a BBC video. Check out Peculiar Potions. You can put it in YouTube. Peculiar Potions by BBC, and you can see footage of the black lemurs of Madagascar doing just this. And then they'll rub it all over themselves for the insecticide properties. But it kind of
seems to be a commonality in multiple animals around the world, and they call it self-anointing, where they might take the chemical directly off an animal. They might ingest part of it and foam it out of their mouth, and then they rub it all over their fur, feathers, spines, whatever they have. And that seems to have those antiparasitic effects, might remove mites and ticks, things like that, or might even be a disguise from predators too, or a deterrent.
Right. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg scenario. It's like, did the animal develop a taste for this because it's evolutionarily beneficial, because it's an insecticide or whatever, and the psychoactive effect is secondary? Or are they enjoying the psychoactive effects and the insecticide properties are secondary? It's nobody knows, and we'll never know. But very, very interesting thing to think about.
Especially when there's, I guess, modern science is analyzing what these chemicals are, what they do, and then potentially how these animals are utilizing it. And when these chemicals are quite obviously pesticides, they're antifungal, they're antiparasitic in some way, they work internally in the body to flush out toxins or parasites, it seems fairly safe to say that there is a beneficial effect, I guess, when used in moderation, right? These toxins, after all, it's pretty crazy that they're doing it to begin with. But do you have anything, because there are other animals that are doing this, which we could talk about. Do you want to jump into those, or do you want to add anything first?
Well, we've jumped around a bit in our notes here, but sure. I mean, now that we're on, why don't we go to hedgehogs?
Yeah, exactly. So, hedgehogs, the little drug addicts with clearly very strong livers. So hedgehogs are British and European. Am I right? They're British and European. They're not in Australia. Are they in America?
As pets, I'm not sure they're. Wild. I've never seen a wild hedgehog.
Okay, well, so there's footage and documentation of them getting into turpentine and consuming it, paint and other like caustic substances, really corrosive or toxic. Creosote as well. Yeah. And ingesting enough, or they must be ingesting a small amount to actually start to become foaming at the mouth, constantly foaming for a long time, 15 minutes or so. And then as they're foaming, they're spreading it across their little spines, into their fur, underbelly, wherever they can get to.
They do a strange, like, twitching, rubbing this foam across themselves.
Yeah, they're really getting it all over the place.
Yeah.
And that is probably who knows whether that is a predator deterrent, or it could be antiparasitic. No doubt they're picking up all those exoparasites, so those ticks and things like that from the environment. Who knows? There could even be the purgatory effect of it as well.
Yeah, and I mean they seem to become intoxicated by it. Sometimes they'll be stupefied, but they really seek out like noxious compounds, like paint thinner, which is turpentine, or I've even heard like accounts of like creosote or like kerosene, or just really weird things. They even eat like packs of cigarettes and stuff, which kind of makes them sick, it looks like. But they're doing it. They're out there going for it.
Life's hard as a hedgehog. You got foxes chasing you around, and foxes have a great sense of smell. So maybe you go to whatever lengths you need to cover up your scent and make yourself as disgusting as possible into the surrounding environment.
So maybe it is. Maybe it's deterring through smell. Like if I'm covered in paint thinner, you can't smell me. Or maybe it kills insects, stuff like that. So we're talking some about what some people may be watching the podcast and they're saying, well, these things, they're not really doing it on purpose. They're not like getting high on purpose. They are using this as an insecticide. They're using it to mask their scent or something like that. But there are plenty of examples. We'll probably talk about those a bit later because we've missed a couple things, but in our notes. But there are some really, really strong examples of animals that are really obviously, well, the gorilla and the jaguar were great examples in the beginning, but there's more. The reindeer and the dolphin we'll do those at the end. But yeah, these are like, okay, maybe they're doing it to get high, to inebriate themselves. Maybe they're doing it as an insecticide or some other reason. Maybe it's a bit of both. We're not exactly sure because we can't get in the mind of these animals. But either way, it's quite interesting. And
Yeah.
so go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, just interested to talk about the next topic of catnip and cats. So whenever you're ready, do you have anything further to add to the more like use of toxins for the benefit of the individual species or animals?
Well, I was going to say along the unintentional lines, that, maybe they're doing it for this reason or that. You can find some great videos on YouTube of drunk moose that have eaten fermented pumpkins. And they're wasted. And sometimes I think it was like these two big male moose had gotten drunk on pumpkins and were fighting each other like in the streets of Maine. Running into cars and like causing mayhem. And in that situation, most likely they were consuming these pumpkins for nutrients, for sustenance. And the intoxication was a secondary effect. I don't know if there's been any studies. We haven't asked the moose what they were going for, but could be a bit of both.
There's going to be commercially produced pumpkins en masse laying around at about Halloween time, from my experience in the Northern Hemisphere. So October, November, you're starting to get colder temperatures, maybe snowfall in parts too.
Yep.
So they're probably stocking up for the winter, smashing into high calorific value foods like pumpkins, drawing them out of the forest, maybe closer to communities, settlements, which we've heard of, coming through town and eating people's pumpkins, especially if they're in a big pumpkin patch. And whether that intoxicates them at the same time could have an effect. People leave these pumpkins around for a long time. But there could also be alcohol laying around because it's Halloween celebration time. They could, who knows? Could be getting into that too. Other animals do, which we'll talk about.
In these northern areas where there are mooses, the pumpkins are freezing at night and then being heated by the sun during the day and are fermenting. We'll try to link in the description some of these videos and stuff, but I've gone all over the place, so I'll let Callum go to the next.
That's all good. That's all part of it. So on the topic of alcohol and alcohol intoxication in the animal kingdom, moose, whether they are getting intoxicated on human-produced alcohol or natural fermentation within pumpkins, there are accounts of certain animals really, really going pretty hard on alcohol, especially in Asia, where the Asian elephants, they could be working elephants or wild elephants, they're getting into communities and getting into the rice wine, and where people have been brewing up this really strong, I'd imagine it's like a 37% proof stuff, and these elephants are getting into it, whether they've been attracted to it and they're seeking it out, thinking it's something else, or it has been encouraged for them to drink this stuff by their human guardians. We're not sure, but it's pretty solid evidence that they do inebriate pretty hard and cause all kind of chaos in the towns there in groups of drunken elephants.
Yeah, I think there was an account that I read that they actually had to shoot whatever, that's controversial, but an elephant was shot that was drunk and rampaging, and they put it down because it was destroying buildings and killing people and
that's right. There are accounts of that. Yeah, the behavior is very similar to drunken humans, really, from the footage. And it seems to be that the most elephants are the most unpredictable, problematic when that happens. But that's there is some footage. Scott and I have seen some footage of, I think it was the BBC might have filmed it, but it was back in the 1960s in Africa, of a number of different animals in the Okavango Delta, as was described by the narrator. And it were baboons, I think, or types of primates, elephants,
boars,
and wild boars, or warthogs, things like that. And they were clearly absolutely smashed or inebriated on they were intoxicated on alcohol, and the narrative followed the lines of they were eating the marula tree's fruit, which is this. It looks to me like a loquat or a loquat, apricot kind of thing. Has a big seed in the middle, and the story was explaining that these fruits fall onto the ground, ferment, animals get into them, get drunk, and spread the seeds around, and seemingly enjoying doing that as well. So it was an interesting narrative. Whether it's true or not is up for discussion.
So there is some accounts on the internet that say it was fake, that they spiked the fruits or they spiked food with some kind of pure grain alcohol or something like that. And we didn't dig too deep into that. The video is amazing. When I first saw it, I thought, well, wow, this is super interesting. But there were some unscrupulous things going on with documentaries. What's the thing about there was something about these little rats that ran off a cliff that they found out was fake. I don't know.
Lemmings? It's like lemming.
Yeah, what are they called?
Lemmings.
Yeah, and they run off cliffs, right?
Yeah.
So supposedly that's fake too.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Anyway.
That gave birth to the game, Lemmings. No one knows the origin story of that game.
Is that an Australian game?
I think I played it when I was a kid once. Lemmings. Still don't understand
what do. You run off a cliff?
I think it's just a team game. You just follow the leader, basically. And it's just based off that whole thing. Like, don't be a lemming. You just follow whoever's leading you astray into, to a terrible destination, but you're being a lemming.
So apparently, much like the lemmings, because there was some documentary where they filmed them like running off a cliff. Apparently that is false. Maybe perhaps the elephants, warthogs, baboons being drunk may also be one of those sensational documentaries that kind of made stuff up. We don't know for sure, but we could look more into that.
Probably just to touch on another animal in particular that I was reading into this, like, well, if that video is not accurate, then is there any value in that at all? I guess theoretically there could be value in animals seeking out some form of ethanol in the food or some form of fermentation. I mean, humans know that fermented foods are really good for us in moderation. And so there are some birds that do seem to encourage fermentation in the fruits that they damage, and then they will return to it later. Yeah, birds on a binge. Nice.
Yeah, so that's about birds seeking out fermented fruits, including, I believe, holly.
Yep.
I'll quote from sorry, we haven't talked about this yet. It's called Animals and Psychedelics, and it is by Gregorio Samarini. I believe he is Italian. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Just a quote real quick. At this time of year, the trees are laden with scarlet fruits called Christmas or holly berries. The robins and other kinds of birds as well gorge themselves on these fruits, binging until they are blatantly drunk, is a quote from Animals and Psychedelics. And we can't forget about, we've read 7 different pronunciations of this guy's name. Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe. He got his moose drunk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
most people probably don't know who this fella is, but he was apparently a big deal in Denmark back in 1546.
Astronomer, right?
It was a pretty established noble or wealthy man from a wealthy lineage who became an astronomer and actually made some major contributions to astronomical science, discovering like the supernova for the first time and making contributions to the theories that all planets revolve around the sun. So it was pretty prominent of the day. Very well established, very wealthy man. But it can't all be about business, right? So this guy,
that's right.
This guy owned a moose. Somehow he got a moose, and he trained that moose to be like an elk or a moose. The descriptions call them both. They name it more a
Right.
moose, but we're not sure. It's a large deer animal species. And he somehow trained this animal, probably from a very young age. They do exist in Denmark, so it's likely that it happened. The accounts would run alongside his carriage and live in the castle with him. And it would be this well-known pet of the area, very domesticated, and would act playfully like a dog and follow him very loyally. So he trained this thing to do many things. One of them was to drink alcohol with Tycho and the whole community within the castle and greater area. And they would get this thing really drunk and would do this for years of its life, to the point where it seemed like it would just prefer to drink alcohol by itself.
What, they would give it like troughs of beer or something?
Yeah, I think no doubt they trained it to start, and then they just give it troughs, and it would just keep going back.
Because I had a dog. Actually, his name was Heineken, because when he was a puppy, my dad had set a 6-pack of Heineken on the back of the truck. And he was so small of a puppy, my dad had left him in the back of the truck and ran in the house real quick to unlock the door, and he was going to come back and get the dog and the beer. By the time he came back, not 2 minutes later, the dog had knocked the beer off the back of the truck and jumped down. The beer broke on the concrete, and it drank all the beer, and it was wasted. Nobody told it to do that, so
yeah, knew exactly.
No
what
prompting there.
Yeah.
Right, it knew what it was doing. Yeah.
Sad story about that moose was it intoxicated itself so much one day that it fell down the castle stairs, broke its leg, and then passed away after that. So similar consequences to many a man and woman who have partaken in alcohol in excess.
Right.
Yeah. So
poor
yeah, loosest astronomer ever.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. He was apparently a real character. Apparently his cousin cut off his nose in a sword duel. He got allegedly angry over a heated discussion over who was the greater mathematician. His cousin and he were fighting with swords, and the old Tycho got his part of his nose cut off. So he wore a prosthetic nose in all of the famous paintings of him.
Wow. Super interesting. Tycho Brahe in his drunk moose. Callum, do you mind if we do catnip next? Because I just so happen to have a bunch of catnip and a cat right here.
A volunteer. Fantastic. Oh, she's looking
science.
right at that pile there.
So I'm just gonna kind of. Oh, it looks nice and crumbly. And we'll just see what happens. If you want to give maybe an introduction to catnip.
Well, catnip is an interesting one. Apparently catnip contains nepentolactone. Nepentolactone is a iridoid, which is a group of chemicals. But nepentolactone is a phytochemical. It's produced by a plant, and apparently it mimics cat sex pheromones. And it's maybe the reason why they're so attracted to it and why they start rubbing up against it and playing afterwards. And it actually, as many of us know, like pheromones are, what are they? Exochemicals. They're chemicals that are released from the body or the plant that interact with other species or other individuals in the same population. So it's a big chemical messenger you can release out into your environment. And I'm not sure if cats release this as well when they're on heat or whatever it is, but that plant does. And the cats, I don't know if they know or care, but they're having the same biological reaction to it.
Right. Yeah, Mitchie's not too into it today, I don't think. I gave it to her earlier, and maybe she's like done for the day. But
yeah,
she's not doing much. That's right. She's not doing much yet, but we'll keep an eye on her. Apparently, it affects It affects tigers, lions, bobcats, lynx, whatever. It pretty much affects all cats because it sort of mimics this like sex pheromone that certain cats excrete. However, in a population of cats, a certain percentage will react to it and a certain percentage is not really interested. So it might be, I don't know if it's 50% or 80% that enjoy it and the other 10 or 20% doesn't. But there's some small group of like Catholic cats or really like religious pious cats that just won't do drugs. But
they've transcended above the drug use.
They don't need it.
It's
but
apparently like 2/3 of domestic cats will be drawn to it and will have a psychoactive effect from it. Pretty
great.
high.
So you know the number. I'm still trying to get Mitchie into it, but she's just kind of not going for it.
I'll let you tell the story about your cat's involvement with this plant chemical here. But apparently, catnip also contains. So the iridoids are a group of chemicals that are insecticides as well. So there are catnip products that humans can use, and apparently they're quite strong. They're quite effective. Some would say as powerful, if not more powerful, than DEET, which is in a lot of the personal insect repellent sprays.
Well, that's cool. So, and just to touch on the human use of catnip real quick. So for humans can make a tea out of it. One interesting thing about catnip is it smells a lot like cannabis. Like if you were riding with this in your car and you got pulled over, like it stinks and it smells a lot like cannabis. Mitchie is now licking the catnip. So, and humans can make a tea out of it. Some people will even smoke it as a cannabis substitute. It doesn't do very much beyond a mild calming effect, whether drinking a tea or smoked. It's good for like a nighttime tea to just kind of calm the nerves. But the effects that it has on humans is not really anything like it has on cats. So, yeah, the story Callum was talking about, same cat, Mitchie, and Mitchie means cat in Quechua, so her name is Cat. In Quechua. One time I got her some catnip. I didn't have any catnip growing like I do now. That was a fresh plant. Maybe the fire, I was drying it over the fire. Maybe that broke down the compounds. I'm not sure. But anyway, I bought some catnip that was already dried, and I put it in a bowl. And I was reading about the topic of animals that use drugs, and I just put it in a bowl. And I thought, the cats will come by and take a sniff and enjoy it, and I probably won't really notice much. But I figured since I was researching the topic, why not? So I hear some noise in the kitchen, and I come back, and Mitchie has flipped over the entire bowl, a big bowl of catnip, and is just rolling in it. And her pupils are so dilated, I can hardly see any color in her green eyes at all. And I looked at her, and she looked at me like, I was like, "Are you okay, Mitchie?" And she's just rolling around and shit. And she was so high, running around the house, rolling around, seemingly stimulating effect in the beginning, which then over time transitioned into a sedative effect. I actually tried to keep her away from my wife because I thought my wife would be angry that I got the cat got herself that high. Because I didn't show it to her. I mean, she was, look, you can never be in the mind of an animal and know if they're high or not. But from what I observed, I personally am sure Mitchie seemed completely inebriated. So that was fun, and I think Mitchie enjoyed it too.
Out and relaxed after that.
Yeah, then after 30, 25 to 40 minutes, she just passed out and slept straight through the next morning. And Mitchie often enjoys doing catnip now. So we have a plant outside, and as a matter of fact, when it was a small plant, when I first bought it, I had to put a little like a fence, like a tomato cage around it, because she would roll in it until the plant was dead or almost dead. She just would smash it.
Trash it.
Yeah. So anyway,
Reckless drug use.
Oh, yeah, that's right. One thing I forgot that I find amazing, hyenas are affected by catnip because somewhere down the evolutionary, we think of hyenas as dogs, but somewhere down the evolutionary line, hyenas are connected with cats somehow, and hyenas are affected by catnip, which is really weird.
Ah, I didn't know that they were actually somewhere in between dogs, like canines and felines.
Yep.
Must be a very old lineage.
Yeah.
That's wild. How affected are they?
I'm just Googling hyenas lineage. Hyenas are not members of the dog or cat family. Wow. Instead, they're so unique that they have a family all of their own, the Hyenidae. There are 4 members of the Hyenidae family. So spotted hyenas are more closely related to cats than dogs, despite their dog-like appearance. So yeah, very interesting that they're also affected by catnip.
That is wild.
I found that very strange. Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy. I mean, they're a weird-looking animal when you see them in photos or up close. They have this curved spine, hunchback kind of thing, and strange structure, and big hackles on them, and seem to have this death rivalry with lions. It's wild animal. And
so, Callum,
we didn't quite touch on and this flows in really well to jaguars in the Amazon. If there was anything further to add to their use of the ayahuasca vine that's been documented, either by science, by videographers, or by the native people in the areas, and maybe how they believe how they've taken some of the information from zoo pharmacognosy field, from studying animals' use, and maybe even taken it into human use.
So let me clarify something that a lot of videos on YouTube will say. They'll say that the jaguar is doing ayahuasca. And they're right. The jaguar is doing ayahuasca because ayahuasca is Banisteriopsis caapi. Banisteriopsis caapi contains beta-carbolines. Beta-carbolines are they are the MAOI inhibitor. They're the MAO inhibitor. So they are not the DMT containing portion of the ayahuasca brew. So you have the ayahuasca plant and you have the ayahuasca brew. The ayahuasca brew includes 2 plants, Banisteriopsis caapi and Psychotria viridis. So if you see any videos that say that jaguars are doing DMT, they're not. There's no evidence that jaguars seek out Psychotria, which is the DMT containing plant. They're doing the vine. And they're probably doing it a lot like cats will use grass to purge themselves, but they also seem to get a psychoactive effect from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to clarify that, they're not doing DMT. There's no DMT in the ayahuasca vine. It's the MAOI component. But yeah, people, many groups in the Amazon will state that they learned how to use ayahuasca from the jaguars. Some will say that you ask a Amazonian person, well, how did you discover ayahuasca? How did your people find out about ayahuasca? And they'll say sometimes, well, we've always known about it, which is kind of like, okay, at some point you did, forever and to infinity. Or they'll say another plant showed us, such as tobacco, that they used tobacco, and tobacco gave them a dream to go and pick this plant out of the forest and to use it. Or they'll say that the jaguars showed them. Those are probably the 3 most common answers among the hundreds of Amazonian groups. And I think with the evidence that we have that jaguars use ayahuasca, it makes the most sense scientifically. So yeah, quite interesting.
And to touch on the importance of just the Banisteriopsis caapi vine outside of the ayahuasca brew, there was definite value in just consuming the vine for a lot of the native groups as well for a long period of time. It seemed like they may have only used that as a purgative, I guess, could you describe it as an inebriant? It's like a drunkening effect or a purging effect. And then after that, there was the introduction from word of mouth, different communities, different shamans maybe, who introduced different ways of maybe drinking more of the DMT brew with different plants in it.
We could easily do 5 podcasts just on ayahuasca, but we're hoping to have Glenn Shepard, who gave us some information actually for this podcast that I have forgotten until just this moment to include, which I'm going to have to edit in. But there were some groups apparently that used DMT containing plants for many centuries or millennia. And then there's others like the Machinga and the Manu region that have only used the DMT containing portion recently, but they used ayahuasca for quite a long time. And ayahuasca, if you drink enough of it, just the vine, Banisteriopsis caapi, if you drink enough of it, it absolutely is inebriating. And the jaguar is probably using it as a purgative, as did human beings to rid themselves of parasites, with also having the effect of inebriation, intoxication, psychoactive effect. So yes, ayahuasca definitely is psychoactive just on its own, for sure.
Yep. And I guess on that theme of humans starting to learn from animal use of these plant psychoactives in some way, how about we touch on the stoned ape theory from Terence McKenna?
We're back, and so we had spoken to Glenn Shepard, who we would absolutely love to have on the show. And he gave us some little bits of information. We're going to mention those briefly, but we're going to have him on the show, on the podcast, hopefully one day, and he can expand on them and tell us the full story. But basically, there are these cows that eat sedges. What's the name of the genus, Callum? Cyperus?
Cyperus, which is a really common global genus of these in Australia, they're like a wetland species. So from the Amazon.
I think maybe they're called piri piri, or maybe I'm confused with something else. Anyway, there's some cows that seem to ingest those. And then he talks about this man named Francis, who unfortunately passed away, I believe. Very sad. And Francis had observed TT monkeys. I believe they're called TT monkeys. We'll let Glenn explain the whole story to us. But these monkeys were using some sort of plant that there was an illusion, an idea that they may have been using them as a psychoactive. So we'll get Glenn on the show one day to talk about that, because he can explain it in detail. But next, what are we doing, Callum? We're doing birds.
Yeah, we're going to touch on the bird family. So rooks, crows, corvids is the family, but extends to some parrots and some different types of birds as well, and their particular use of ant mounds.
In addition to that, there are a lot of birds that will collect certain type of herbs and different plants that they'll put in their nest. They really like tobacco for its insecticide properties. Maybe even plants like in the Lamiaceae, in the mint family, that they'll stuff in their nest to try to keep out mites and biting insects and stuff like that. So obviously, pretty obvious that they're using it for its insecticide properties. But there's many birds that will collect, they'll even collect cigarette butts, because somehow they can detect the strong smell or the nicotine in them, and they'll stick cigarette butts in their nest. So it's kind of gross, but
it kind of makes sense when you think about it. I mean, we have chickens here, and we place I guess medicinal herbs in their straw mounded nesting boxes, because they get covered in mites and all kinds of like tick-like parasites. So whatever you can do obviously some of these wild species do it consciously. Maybe they're getting the good stuff, the cigarette butts with
Yeah.
100 chemicals in each cigarette or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely powerful insecticide.
Yeah.
But crows and rooks, and I believe it's the corvids is the family. The crows, ravens,
Yeah.
that family of birds are particularly, many birds do it, but the corvids are particularly interested in doing this thing called anting, where they will find an anthill and they'll sort of scratch it up and piss off the ants, and you'll see them put their wings down where the ants are climbing up on them and biting them. And apparently the ants spray formic acid, and they sort of dust themselves, spread their wings around, and get this formic acid on them to act as an insecticide. But what's interesting, this sort of borders again on the line of, are they doing this for fun? Or are they doing it as an insecticide, as a benefit to their health? Well, in some cases, it just seems that birds they're just doing it as an insecticide. But what's interesting, and you can Google this and find more out about it, some of the birds seem to become addicted to this, and they do it much more often than needed. In fact, some of them do it so much that they're not seeking out food. They're not doing their daily practices as they should. They're just flapping around in an anthill all day.
Yeah. Yep.
And getting covered in formic acid from the ants, which they seem to really, really enjoy. So that's anting.
Yeah. Wild stuff. It seems to be maybe a process that they started or a behavior they took on to rid themselves of mites. But then it may have flowed onto, there's a slight psychoactive effect of this toxin getting in their skin, their eyes, their mouth, whatever it is. But another potential reason why they do it is it could be for pre-consumption. So allowing the ants to just get rid of all of their formic acid, purge themselves of all of their toxins, and then the birds start eating them.
Okay.
So it could be a bit of a mix of all of those.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very hard to tease apart each one of these. That's like, why do people do things? Well, most people don't do things, especially complicated things, for just one reason. There's a lot of little things that are hard to tease apart and say, that's why they did that. And the same goes for animals. We need to think of them as complicated beings that have a consciousness very similar to we do, and they have complicated reasons for what they're doing. So we want to reduce what they're doing to a specific thing, but I think in most cases that's really not proper or applicable. We need to think of them as complicated, conscious, living things, and
it's multifactorial. Yep.
Yeah. There might be a number of reasons. Wanted to touch on, while we're on the subject of ants, and we need to mention this book really explicitly, because this is I gotta shine on that really bad. Let's see if I can't get it better. Anyway, I can link it. You can probably see the title there.
The Natural World and the Instinct to Alter Consciousness. Yep.
Thank you, Callum.
What's the name?
Animals and Psychedelics. And the author is Gregorio Samarini.
Yeah.
And the foreword is by Rob Montgomery. And he was the founder of the Botanical Preservation Corps, which was the organization that first took me to Peru. I am very proud to say. And they are, I believe I'm not sure they exist any longer, but very, very proud to say that I went to Peru with the Botanical Preservation Corps, which Robert Montgomery, the founder, wrote the foreword of this book by Gregorio Samarini. But if you're interested in learning about, Mr. Samarini is a very, very intelligent man, but I would maybe differ with him a little bit, and I would change it to animals and psychoactives, because some of this is more about psychoactives than psychedelics, and we can debate the semantics. I believe it's semantics of the words in another podcast. But Great book if you're interested in animals that use psychoactive drugs, psychedelics, whatever. Check that out. He lists in his book a bit about ants, and it's better to just read the book. He explains it a lot better, but he talks about ants that consume the secretions of a certain beetle, which seems to be psychoactive. And they give such importance to this beetle that they will take so if the hive is flooding, if the colony is flooding, they will remove the beetles first before they remove the larva. So before they remove their own children, they save the drugs. Yeah. So yeah, a lot more in this amazing book about that. He also touches on loco weed, which is something that horses and cows will eat, and it makes them sick, and it's a big issue, probably in Australia as well as the Western United States, because the animals get sick from this. But they seem to actually, after doing it a couple times, they seem to seek it out. I believe it's both horses and cattle. And in addition to that, another thing I don't have too much information about, or maybe not enough time to talk about, we can always come back. If you guys are interested in anything we're talking about, send us a message. Tell us you want to hear about it again, and we can dive deeper into the subject. Bighorn sheep that were consuming a psychoactive lichen that they were nibbling off of rocks. But yeah, Callum, I don't know if you want to say something about loco weed real quick, but we have two more major subjects to cover. Yeah.
Just on the topic of agricultural plant weeds that are causing a bit of a problem for livestock, I'm not as familiar with loco weed, but in Australia we have phalaris grass, and local mobs of kangaroos can get phalaris staggers. So it's not as psychoactive as far as I know, but it's a toxin that builds up in the kangaroo groups, and it seems to inebriate them. That's the behavior that they show. They have the kangaroo staggers where they lose coordination. It's actually quite detrimental to the populations of kangaroos. And so one of the treatments, if you can't just get rid of this highly invasive type of grass, which is everywhere, then you need to add copper to the grass to balance it out. So it must be an imbalance within the kangaroo's biology that's actually causing them or depleting them of copper, and that's affecting their nervous system. So I would imagine loco weed would be something along those lines, but potentially more psychoactive. Am I right?
I think loco weed is a specific chemical that's in a couple species or genera of plants that has an immediate psychoactive effect. And they can eat a certain amount of it, but if they eat too much, it affects them in a really negative way where they're falling over, can't stand up, maybe even potentially like go into a coma and die if they do too much.
Yeah. Yep. On do you have anything to add to loco weed before we move on to...
Let's move on to the last two we have are the big two. These are the big two. These are two examples of it appears to be clear-cut intentional drug use by animals. We saved the best for last. These are and now Mitchie is doing something with the catnip's another good example of intentional drug use with animals. But yeah, the last big two we saved for the end. Which are what, Callum?
So they're good ones. I'm looking forward to those topics. Just before that, a unique one that I found was clay licks in the Amazon and in rainforest environments. Just because they're slightly different, they complement a bit of the information that we're passing on. And these, you might have seen photos of, if you want to come to the Amazon, you'll see maybe photos of all of these macaws perched up on a cliff, or seemingly licking the earth, eating, I think it's called geophagy, where animals just eat dirt. And they do this quite particularly in rainforest environments and they think it is actually tapirs, it's peccaries and wild boar-like animals. There's parrots and different birds that do it too. Maybe even in humans in some environments too. And I think it's probably because there's very low salt contents in the diets and the environment in general, the Amazon. So I think they're trying to get at the salt as well as magnesium and minerals. And then on top of that, that might be the primary drive. And then after that, it could probably have a beneficial effect on actually neutralizing some of the toxins within their systems, because they eat particularly for herbivores, that there's so many plants in the Amazon, and a lot of them are laden with some kind of toxin, that they'll eat this clay in particular that will actually neutralize some of that, and they'll pass it out. So I think elephants in the, it must be in the Congo, congregate. A lot of animals congregate in these central bog areas or wetlandy oases in a way, and they just consume mud. And then they'll return back to the jungle to keep eating fruits, plants, and all the rest. So I think it's a neutralizing effect or counteract toxins. So another use of medicinal plants for animals.
Right, or medicinal substance, clay in this case. I've heard that the parrots like to eat. So in Peru, there's the guairuro, which is this red and black bean. Guairuro, which sounds like something Scooby-Doo would say, like guairuro, Shaggy. It's a very strange word, but they're very, very poisonous. They're a beautiful plant, but the parrots, I've heard native Amazonian people say that the parrots will eat a bunch of clay, and then they'll go and they'll actually eat the guairuro, which is normally extremely toxic. But with this clay in their stomach that can absorb the toxic compounds, they're okay to eat the guairuro. So, yeah, super, super interesting. You know, a lot of people use clay for benefits on the face or in the stomach as well. My wife, I looked in the bathroom the other day and it said Amazonian clay. And I thought, you never rubbed clay on your face when we were in the Amazon. Now you're buying it. Anyway, another story. So the last two we're going to talk about, we'll save dolphins for last.
Yeah. So
the reindeer. And the reindeer, we could do a whole podcast on this. We can really expand upon this. Okay, and let me give a caveat to this, because I'm going to talk a little about Santa Claus and stuff like that. There are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me. One gentleman, I believe his name is Tom. I can't remember his full name. He's a buddy of mine on Facebook, friend of mine on Facebook. A lot of these theories have been debunked. So I'm going to tell you something that it sounds cool. It sounds sensational. There's a lot of truth, and then I'll let you know when it's the part that's more theoretical. So the truth part, the super truth part, the really real part is that reindeer in Siberia and humans will eat the classic fairy tale mushroom, Amanita muscaria. Google it. It's one of the most beautiful mushrooms ever seen. Amanita muscaria contains ibotanic acid and muscimol. And it is legal in almost everywhere, I think. It can be dangerous. I'm not telling you to go eat it, but it is legal if you wanted to have a botanical specimen and look at it. That's a great idea. It is a beautiful, beautiful mushroom. And this mushroom was used for hundreds or thousands of years among Siberian people. And these Siberian people, circling back to the beginning of the podcast, they say that they learned how to use this mushroom from the reindeer because they had observed these people are reindeer herders. They milk the reindeer. They take meat from they kill and get meat from the reindeer. And they said that they learned to use this mushroom from the reindeer because they've actually observed male reindeer or all sorts of reindeer fighting over the mushrooms and attacking each other to get at the mushrooms, and even licking and drinking at the pee, the urine of reindeer and human beings that had previously ingested the mushroom and then went outside to take a pee. So they are using this mushroom as a psychoactive. And this is one of the most clear-cut cases. If you've watched this podcast and you thought, well, everything they're saying is really, you can interpret it in a different way. It's just an insecticide. It's just this. It's just that. Google Amanita muscaria reindeer and lean into that topic and really learn about it, because I don't think there's any argument whatsoever that these reindeer are purposely, intentionally using Amanita muscaria as a psychoactive. It's very clear. And the human beings are using it as well. Siberian shamanism, in fact, the word shaman, I think it's the Tsunga. I want to say it's the Tsunga language. Don't quote me on that, where the word shaman comes from. And these were the people that ingested Amanita muscaria and used it. And apparently, so these people are milking reindeer. This is a bit of an anecdote. I don't know if it's true. Apparently, sometimes if they had noticed, because the people enjoyed eating the Amanita muscaria as well, if they had noticed that the reindeer had eaten a bunch of Amanita muscaria and the reindeer started to take a pee, they might have a little sip of reindeer pee. And the urine of the reindeer or a person that had ingested Amanita muscaria is also intoxicating, inebriating. So, yeah, the magical, inebriated reindeer piss drinking rituals is a thing.
Shout out to the original Siberian shaman or Siberian shaman's assistant who took that ethnobotanical adventure of drinking the first cup of piss from a reindeer. Right. Someone figured it out.
And there is it's such a fun, interesting thing to read about and learn about. And there are these associations with Christmas. And this is the perhaps less factual part. Like I said, there's people smarter than me that have supposedly debunked this theory. I haven't dug deep into it, so I don't know, but I'm gonna pass it on to you, and you can do your own research. The Amanita muscaria mushroom is the red and white mushroom, and Santa Claus is red and white. The Amanita muscaria mushroom, the fly agaric, I should say it's fly agaric. It appears under coniferous trees in the fall or winter. So like presents under the tree. All of that's a bit very interesting and perhaps a bit apocryphal, a bit needs more research. Before I forget, mentioning the name fly agaric. I don't remember what agaric means, but apparently people throughout Europe and the old world would put it in the windowsill or would mix it with a bit of milk or sugar to kill flies. And the flies would, and Gregorio Sammartini talks a lot in this book about this. So check this out. Put it in a windowsill, the flies would land on it, and they said it killed them. But he argues in his book that it didn't kill them. They're actually stupefied. They were intoxicated. They landed on the mushroom, they licked it, ate it, whatever, and they would fall over like they're dead. But if you left them there for a couple hours, they'd get back up and they'd fly away. So even insects, perhaps, are intentionally intoxicating themselves with mushrooms, various plant substances. So yeah, that's a little bit about the fly agaric. I'll let
very
Colin
interesting. Yeah. So I'm gonna guess that fly agaric is from some kind of Latin derivative of aggregate. So the collector of flies, they aggregate on these mushrooms.
Yeah.
Probably being attracted, but maybe stupefied on purpose to actually contain them on that mushroom for longer, to roll in it, to collect spores, and then eventually take a bunch of spores off to a new section of the pine forest to maybe distribute the spores. So we're not really sure. Maybe they're getting something out of it. That's great. That's a bit of downtime. Idea.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the whole, I guess the religious context of the reindeer and the fly agaric, Amanita muscaria mushroom. it kind of all ties in with the flying sleigh of reindeer and
Yep.
this gentleman flying around and giving gifts to people, or having some kind of religious importance within at least European folklore. So whether it's true or not, maybe there's grains of truth in it. Maybe it all came from some kind of folkloric story lineage. Fascinating to look into whether it's totally true or not.
Absolutely. And there certainly are aspects, like I said, of people have been known to use them for a very, very long time. And the reindeer, whether it's connected to Christmas or not, we can't be sure. But just to read a sentence, just a random quote real quick about this from Mr. Gregorio Samarini in his great book. Other great seekers of the mushroom high are Canadian caribou. During their migrations, these animals move in a long, singular file column. When the colony passes a cluster of Amanita muscaria, female adults feed on it greedily. Within the course of 1 or 2 hours, they abandon the column entirely, running around awkwardly and shaking their heads and hindquarters from side to side.
Wow.
So, all right, Callum, what's the last topic?
That's wild. So tying into, I guess, it's in between the human and natural realm of zoopharmacognosy is the stoned ape theory by Terence McKenna. The late Terence McKenna wrote a number of amazing books that we recommend you delve into if you're looking to explore more of this stuff. Food of the Gods. Yep. And he devised the theory that perhaps mushrooms like the psilocybin containing magic mushroom may have played an important role in human evolution, especially psychological or cognitive evolution of early man, humans, or humans before they were human in a way, millions and millions of years ago in Africa. Yep. And suggested that these mushrooms, we know they existed largely across the planet, but we know they definitely existed in Africa at the time. And so it is extremely likely that early humans would have bumped into these things and would have been curious enough to consume them. And there's the theory that this may have led to some of the cognitive development or acceleration of human abilities or brain development or learning and imagination, even language and vocalization, even social orgies, everything like that. And It's interesting when you tie it into more objective modern science of studying psilocybin. There's a lot of focus on psilocybin these days, especially in Australia. And they found that it does affect the neuron development, the physical growth of neuron dendrites, so the expansion of these linear cells that spread out within your brain to reach new locations and to make connections. And it's localized in the prefrontal cortex, which is right where all of our higher order cognitive abilities come from. So all of our problem solving and language and imagination. And at the same time, that center of the brain apparently is a little vulnerable to stress. So stress can really shut it down and impact it. So curiously, psilocybin has been used to reduce anxiety, stress, and depression in people. And it's also been found to increase creativity, problem solving, or changing neuroplasticity in the way we think. So it's been used clinically and therapeutically for those purposes, especially in either highly managed higher doses for people with severe issues with PTSD or are dealing with terminal illness or something, but also microdosing, small amounts of this stuff can be aids to creativity and analytical or cognitive thinking. So it's all kind of tying in. Maybe it has benefits for the animal kingdom too, but that's just a bit of maybe our story coming out of what we might have considered the animal kingdom into where we are now.
Exactly. Yeah. So Callum is bringing it, full circle, that maybe our early evolutionary ancestors on the plains of Africa noticed this thing that looks like something nice to eat because it's soft and juicy and it's just popping out of cow manure. Read Terence McKenna's book, Food of the Gods. But Terence proposes that the use of psychoactives, psychedelics, entheogens in this case, with the magic mushroom, with the psilocybin containing mushroom, is something that drove our evolution. And on the one hand, I think we have to be careful of a reductionist view that psychoactives made us human. They created every religion. They, every temple in ancient Egypt and the Americas is based upon psychoactives. I don't think that's true, but the opposite's not true either. These things did play an integral role, at least in our culture. Now, in our early evolution, that's debatable. There's no strong evidence. There never will be, because these things decay, and you're never gonna. There's just not enough evidence from a million years ago, literally, literally a million years ago. But it's definitely something to think about, to look into, and that's really interesting. Anyway, Fruit of the Gods, amazing book. But our last subject is a little. Now it's gonna get weird. Like, it's gonna get really, really weird.
Lock the door.
So
stay
little
home.
little disclaimer.
Prepare yourself.
Like, if there's anybody under 18 or 21 in the room that maybe it's gonna have like sexual content, explicit content, and like this is like EthnoCO podcast after hours. If you've been listening this long,
M18.
Yeah, 18 plus to be good, because it does include explicit content. So we're gonna get a little weird. Intra-species relationships. It's one thing we're gonna talk about.
Yep.
And as I plug my computer in because it's dying, I'm gonna let Callum introduce it.
Yeah. So we're going to the higher order animal kingdom, and we're going to explore dolphins and how dolphins have tie into this zoopharmacognosy, this use of toxins or chemicals, medicinals or psychoactives. And so I think it's probably good to start with the oceanic dolphin. I'm not sure if it was a bottlenose dolphin, might have been.
I think
bottlenose
it was.
Dolphin and their interaction with the pufferfish.
Yeah, and this part's not very explicit. We'll give another warning when it is. But,
it's just to introduce the I guess the use of drugs by these dolphins, these marine dolphins, and so they will. Yep, you want to add to something?
Go ahead, Callum. I'm sorry.
Yep. So these dolphins will harass a pufferfish, which we all know as this fish that inflates, has some spines on it, but also contains toxins. What is it? Tetrodotoxin within its flesh. Yeah. And is highly toxic. I think it's a neurotoxin for animals and humans alike. We have some species locally here that aren't the pufferfish but have the same toxin, and basically leads to death if you eat it. But these groups of young male curious dolphins, inquisitive dolphins, will harass these pufferfish until they secrete some kind of psychoactive chemical, and they take it into their system somehow and appear to be enjoying this and exhibit some strange behaviors, some playful behaviors, some kind of slight inebriation within the dolphins themselves. And that tetrodotoxin we might talk about in other future episodes too, because that's a fascinating one that's used by humans as well.
Will. Oh, we absolutely will. We'll talk about tetrodotoxin in the
zombie powder, zombie powders of Haitian culture,
of Wade Davis and Haiti, and just to give you a little a taste of a podcast to come. Probably the most interesting ethnobotanical adventure that has ever been recorded would be Wade Davis and the Haitian zombies. But that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about the dolphins. And so this is seemingly one of the most intentional uses of drugs among animals, psychoactives, period, because the dolphins really are obviously not eating this thing, and they sort of seem to share it with their friends. So you can find the video. Yeah, pass it around. Yeah, you can find the videos on YouTube of these dolphins that are messing with this pufferfish, really making him angry, pissing off this pufferfish, and passing it around to their friends. So it tends to be the young male dolphins that are doing this. And this was actually recorded by these submersibles that they made look like turtles, or they made look like a nautilus or some sort of sea creature. And so they were filming these dolphins, a pod of young male bachelor dolphins. They're probably in a fraternity. Oh, that part's a joke. And they found a pufferfish, which was very upset, and it had inflated itself, filled itself with water, and began to release tritatotoxin and related compounds. And this camera, this submersible, which was disguised as a turtle or other sea creature, recorded the dolphins, seemingly using it as a drug, passing it around, playing with it, and then exhibiting altered behavior after having done this, and seeking it out, And so one thing, I can't remember if we mentioned this or not, I think we did, but higher, more intelligent animals tend to seek out drug behavior, using drugs, psychoactives. Even humans, if you look at the IQ scale, the humans that tend to do more drugs tend to be more intelligent. Now, whether it is more intelligent to do drugs, it depends on which drugs you're doing, and how often you're doing them. But people who are more intelligent and animals who are more intelligent tend to do drugs more often. So yeah, these dolphins are basically using this pufferfish as an intoxicant and getting small amounts of tritatotoxin, perhaps, or other compounds in their system. And supposedly, well, definitely, the fugu fish, in Japanese cuisine, I believe it's called fugu, you can eat it as sashimi, you can eat it as nigiri, with the rice and a piece of fish laid over it. And supposedly the best fugu chefs are ones that know how to prepare it, leaving a trace amount of tritatotoxin so that your lips actually go numb as you're eating this extremely deadly toxin. Because if you eat the kidneys of the fugu fish, I believe the kidneys or the ovaries, there's other body parts, you will die. I mean, you will be dead. And we'll go into this more when we talk about the zombies in Haiti. You may appear dead in a comatose state. Your heart might only beat once or twice per minute, but you're actually not dead, and you could be buried alive. That's leading into the zombie thing. But these dolphins are using the same, it's a similar or the same fish, and they're using it for the tritatotoxin or related compounds to get high on it. And we haven't got to the
behavior. What kind of behavior are they showing?
To be honest with you, I don't know. It mostly appeared that they were excited and that they were sharing it with their friends. We should link, when we post the podcast on Spotify, we should link these videos. We'll try to link sources and link the videos so people can make up their own minds, because obviously it's subjective when you're watching an animal. Well, what's it really doing? Anyway, a lot of people smarter than me think the dolphins are intoxicating themselves. So nothing has been,
because we've got them locally here in the ocean. I'll just go down, poke one, and just how do you think the chemical must enter the water column and then go through the dolphin's skin or something? Because obviously the dolphin aren't breathing down there.
I think it's extruded through their spines, and they're
getting punctured a little bit potentially.
Maybe, I don't know. It would be very interesting to find out.
Well, that's brave zoo pharmacological
Pharmacognosy. Zoo
study.
pharmacognosy. Callum is a spear fisherman, so we would love to have him do some research about this. And I
Yeah.
might go to Iquitos to, not personally, but to explore some of the mythology about the explicit part of this episode. So we were thinking about this and we were like, I don't know what episode we should include this in, but we got to talk about it because it's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. So again, this is the explicit part. Cover your ears, cover your eyes, run away. Yeah, Callum, you got anything to add before we go into that?
No, I guess this is a little bit of a trailer of a future episode that we're going to do as well.
Sure.
It's going to tie nicely into the stranger realm of ethnoecology, ethnobotany, and zoo pharmacognosy, and other topics.
Yep.
So we're going to jump to Iquitos, which is northern Peru.
Yep.
And we're going to touch on a different species of dolphin that is the pink river dolphin, the Amazon.
Yep. So again, we didn't know where exactly to include this, but we wanted to talk about it because it's so interesting and wild. So there's this mythology in the Amazon that the pink river dolphin, it's not just in Iquitos, but that's maybe the epicenter of the myth, or the Western Amazon is the epicenter of the myth, that dolphins, these pink river dolphins. So from what I've heard, the Shipibo will kill them on sight. If they see a pink river dolphin, they're like, that thing is a demon, murder it. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I've heard that. They will kill it. They will kill it.
That is insane.
They don't like them. They do not like them. So there's this mythology that the pink river dolphin, which, some of them have this, instead of a horizontal mouth, they actually have a vertical mouth. So they can grab prey with their mouth going this way instead of like this, which is super interesting and weird.
They're a very strange looking dolphin. Like when you look at them in Google Images, they're really chunky, really fat, huge head on them for sonar locating, a long beak, really long beak, twisted as well, huge flippers, really. You can just tell they're very different to bottlenose dolphins, and then their cousins over in the Yangtze River, which I think might now be extinct, which is the Yangtze River dolphin.
One of the saddest things I've heard in recent years, that the Yangtze River dolphin, which is probably again convergent evolution, probably separate. Anyway, Yangtze River dolphin is very similar, but probably or almost extinct. So the mythology relates to the fact that, or the myth that these dolphins have the ability to seduce people. Typically, it's young men and women. And typically the story with men goes that there will be a beautiful, beautiful woman who comes, she's near the riversides. Let's just say we're in Iquitos. Iquitos is the largest city in the world that you cannot reach by car. You have to go in a plane or a boat. Largest city in the world you cannot reach by a car, has no roads. Anyway, you are, it's late night. You're down by the river in Iquitos at one of the clubs and dancing and having a good time. And the most beautiful woman you've ever seen comes up to you, and she's just as interested as can be in you. And so one of the parts of the myth is that they sort of cast this magical spell on you. They're so beautiful and so interesting. And usually they'll always wear a hat or a head covering, be it male or female. And if you were to take off their hat or head covering, you would see they still have their blowhole. Like they have a hole in their head to breathe through, because this is a dolphin, perhaps an evil shaman, perhaps a spirit from the other world that has transitioned themselves into a human, much like Amazonian shamans can transition themselves into jaguars and other animals. This dolphin is going the other way, and he has transitioned himself into a human to prey upon humans. I don't know for what exact reason. That'd be something great to study, to learn about. But with men, often the story, if a man drowns in these regions of the Amazon, they'll say the dolphins seduced them and pulled them underwater and killed them. And to lead more into that, there are reports, very clear reports, this is not mythology, that dolphins will rape people. Male dolphins will rape people and drown them in the process. I mean, that's something that's recorded in the modern day. Actually, we're going to share a video, which is quite tame, don't worry, of a lady at a water park being humped by a male dolphin. But sometimes they will get a little too playful and they'll kill the person because they'll keep them underwater for too long. Also, women in the Amazon, sometimes if they have a boyfriend, they have a husband, and the husband's been away for a while, or somehow they have a child out of wedlock, or the child can't possibly belong to the boyfriend, they'll claim that the male river dolphin seduced me and impregnated me, and I have a dolphin child. My wife's laughing in the other room. She has heard this myth. So now the weirdest part. So a buddy of mine in Peru, we were in Tarapoto in the central jungle of Peru, which is south of Iquitos, and we were up. This is 2014, and we were up late one night drinking. And as the hours went on and we got drunker and drunker, he began to tell some stories that maybe he hadn't shared with too many people. And all of a sudden he got kind of choked up. He was like, "What's wrong, man?" And he said to me, "Do you know the sound that a man and a dolphin make when they're having sex?" And I recoiled in horror. I said, "What are you talking about, man?" And he told me that men in Iquitos, on nights when they can't find a female human companion, will apparently go down to the beaches along the rivers and will have sex with female dolphins. And apparently the dolphins are willing, they're a willing participant in this, because the dolphins will come into shallow water and enjoy themselves with the men of Iquitos and other regions of the Amazon and have sex with men, dolphin man sex.
Yeah.
in certain regions of the Amazon. And I didn't believe him. I said, that cannot be true. That's impossible. And this is the strangest thing I've ever heard. It's all downhill from here on the podcast. You'll never hear anything weirder than this.
Oh, you might. We'll see.
We'll see.
But this is up there.
This is up there. So.
And apparently they can beach themselves for 15 minutes and before they need to go back into the water.
Okay.
Biologically. So a lot of people would think, oh, they can't come out of the water. Or, well, they can.
Or perhaps they're in shallow water. So I began, to very delicately ask other Peruvians, especially in the Amazonian regions, if they had heard this. And almost every time, if you ask somebody who was in the know, that knew about folklore and mythology, and was from the Amazonian region, they would just say yes. They would just answer yes. People have sex with dolphins, like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, shocking account. But in the modern day, there are recorded accounts of researchers, some female researchers, actually engaging in interspecies sex with dolphins.
Yeah.
Yes. So
this is the information you all need to know. So
that's
we're just
right.
communicators.
That's right.
And apparently, so that's a very interesting case that we could talk about. Just before that, there is a spiritual or religious importance or cultural importance of dolphins in the Amazon. And Scott, you're familiar with this. I guess removing and drying the vagina of a Amazonian river dolphin and wearing it as a necklace as a native person or a person within the area as a bit of a maybe a bit of a spiritual aphrodisiac or a signaling pendant to say I'm ready to marry or I'm ready to take a woman or something like that.
Which do you remember which group that was from?
No, this was a story from a couple of years ago now.
So we could do a whole podcast on this if people are interested. I'm going to visit Pucallpa and potentially Iquitos this year in June, July, or August. And I would love to find more out about this because it's just such a strange cultural artifact of humanity. And I mean, one thing to say, and then we'll probably wrap it up, but apparently the anatomy of the female dolphin is almost exactly, it looks almost exactly the same as a human female. So yeah,
we'll leave it at that then.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah. So Callum, we got anything else to add before we go out? Oh, before I forget, check out BBC Peculiar Potions. Just type in BBC Peculiar Potions, and you'll find some information about animals that use psychoactives, that use drugs. Don't forget to check out this amazing book by Gregorio Samarini. And what else do we have to say, Callum?
Not a lot of new stuff, but just to recap, if anyone wants to do their own research, we're gonna put all the videos up. But just to recap, you've got gorillas in Gabon, we've got stoned ape theory and Terence McKenna's work, with anting and birds, particularly corvids, clay licks in the Amazon, dolphins, Madagascan lemurs, Tycho Brahe, and catnip. So you are all welcome to go do your own research on that. And just a little bit of an advertisement for the future. We've mentioned Glenn Shepherd, who will hopefully be coming on in a future episode. And we'll be delving into more of those things that are definitely within his field of expertise. And that's going to be really exciting among some other specialists from the Amazon region. So lots of cool things to get into in the future.
We can dive into other subjects as well, such as, we can expand on all these subjects. We don't want any podcast we don't want this to go on for 3, 4, 5 hours. If people are interested in certain things, like the reindeer and Amanita muscaria, or Amanita muscaria in general, we can dive into that. Dolphins and the pufferfish, or the pufferfish and the Haitian zombies with Wade Davis. Maybe if we're really lucky, we could get Wade Davis on the podcast, which would be awesome. I mean, if we had Glenn Shepherd and Wade Davis, that would be amazing. Hopefully we can do that.
Yeah.
If you guys want to support us, we need some mics, we need some cameras. And me and Callum are going to do this any which way. So you're welcome to listen to us with this is our laptops. You're welcome to listen to us as we are now, but we are doing a GoFundMe. And I'm going to share that on my website. I'm going to share that on Facebook. My website is www.ethnoco.com, which is ETHNOCO.com, where our motto is helping people help plants help people. And my Facebook is Scott Light, so Scott Lite. And we would love to have interactions with you guys. I think we're going to be on Spotify?
Yeah, so we will be publishing the video content on YouTube, and we're going to aim for Spotify once we have a large enough batch to mass publish and launch all at once. We're going to have about 7 or 8 episodes up on Spotify that'll be free for anyone to get involved in. And if you like to contribute, like Scott says, we're going to purchase these things anyway. If you want to contribute, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So we're going to make this a consistent thing every 2 weeks or so. And we're going to have a range of topics out there. So if you want to reach me, chuck in an email anytime. Questions, stories, requests, anything like that. We love a bit of communication with folks out there from anywhere on the planet, really.
Sure.
That's Callum G. Reynolds, CALLAM G REYNOLDS @gmail.com. And we'll get back to you fairly quickly as well.
And my email is info@ethnoco.com. We probably need to give Callum as well his own EthnoCO email. But yeah, right?
Yeah.
You can reach him there, Facebook, whatever. So thank you guys for tuning in. And I hope you enjoyed this strange, weird, and interesting episode of the EthnoCO podcast. And I hope there's lots more to come. So yeah, thank you guys.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the EthnoCO podcast, where our motto is helping people, help plants, help people. Please check out the links below and donate to our GoFundMe and Patreon to support the show.
We want to bring you a podcast that is inspiring, exciting, and scholarly, and share a bit of our curiosity about plants, people, anthropology, botany, shamanism, native cultures, environmentalism, and adventures in ethnobotany. Enjoy the show.